So I introduce myself. I am not a robotic. I am not a scientist. I am a politician and I would say a generalist. So I'm interested in many things. And before I go to the report, maybe some words on how we function in the European Parliament. You know that we are 751 members from 28 countries, including UK. UK still is a member of the European Union, so our British colleagues are very active in the European Parliament. We work in 22 languages, so every meeting is translated into 22 languages, which explains also why we are slow sometimes in taking decisions, because it's not only the language, it's also the cultural mentality between these different member states. In the European Parliament there are 7 political groups. So to be a political group you need to have 25 members, but out of 8 member states. You cannot have a political group with 25 members of 1 member state. 8 member states. These 7 political groups go from the extreme right, and maybe you know Front National, Marine Le Pen in France. She is leader of the extreme right, but they are similar. Farage is not, UKIP is not, there's not such a big difference between with French nationalists. This is why 7 political groups, it's sometimes difficult to find a compromise on several issues. What is important to know is that the European Parliament has not the right of initiative. We cannot propose a law. This is different from national parliaments. But if we want something to be done, we can draft a report, an initiative report, which goes to the European Commission, and then the European Commission has 3 months to reply and to respond if they want to become active or not on our recommendations. And this is what we have done with the report on the legal and ethical implications of robotics. So just to tell you how there is no European law. There is a recommendation or call for to become active on robotics, but we are not in the situation of having one. So I discovered, I am myself, I am a new member of the European Parliament. I was active in politics in Luxembourg before becoming a member of the European Parliament. I had different portfolios, but this is not interesting. But I discovered robotics. One of the first seminars organized by my committee. I am vice president of the Committee on Legal Affairs in the European Parliament. So in one of the seminars, the Secretariat proposed different issues that would be important to be treated by us, and one of it was robotics. So I discovered this issue, and it took some time before I could convince my colleagues that this would be an interesting thing, that it is not about science fiction, but it is real work. And so in January 2015, we created a working group. This means that every political group, so the 7 political groups, sent 1 representative to this committee, and we invited other committees to be present in this working group. So a working group is not a working group in the European Parliament is not a working group in a ministry or at a university. We meet once a month, and we invited experts, scientists, industry. We had discussions with stakeholders to have an idea on what exactly it was about. The opportunities, the challenges, and we tried to figure out what could be the outcomes, the desirable and the undesirable outcomes of the development of robotics. We were assisted by our scientific department. The Parliament has a scientific department, and they made a foresight study on the unknowns and the soft impacts. Well, it was fascinating. And after 1.5 years, I was able to present a report And it took another 6 months before it could be adopted in the plenary, and this happened in February, so last month. The Committee on Legal Affairs was responsible for the report, but 6 other committees of the European Parliament made an opinion, and we tried to integrate this opinion into the initial report. We had more than 500 amendments, so it was a big challenge to come to a comprehensive report. And of course, it is like always in compromises, it's half full or half empty, but it was fascinating. So, well, when I go through, maybe you can ask questions when I finish this. So that
whatever you prefer.
No, on the report. Our first difficulty was to give a definition of robotics. What is a robot? And then when we got all the amendments, there is a certain confusion between Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, digitalization, automation. It goes together. So our first call to the Commission is maybe to have a European definition of robots and also a classification, because a robot is not a robot. There are so many different types of robots, and that's also why we believe that there should be legal answers for different applications, not a general robotics law, but look at the applications and then try to find a legal answer. Nevertheless, there are some principles that are common to all the robots. In general, I want nevertheless to stress that the European Parliament is very friendly to the development and deployment of robots, because the general belief is that there is a big potential and it will facilitate life, work, and hopefully bring benefits to, and this is maybe the big challenge, to all the human beings, not only to an elite, but the accessibility of robots is of robotics, not only in our member states, but through the world, is of course a big challenge. Then we very much, there are some paragraphs to encourage research, to give financial means to the research, but with the concern that there should be multi-professional teams and finance research not only on the technical and scientific aspects, but also on the societal consequences. Have teams with ethical experts on ethics, sociologists, philosophers, lawyers, so that we have a comprehensive approach to. Of course, and this is not news, that we insist very much on the standardization at international level for reasons of security and safety, and we call for the creation of criteria to have testing areas in the European Union to be able to make tests in real life, not only in labs or in protected environment, but in real life. And we establish protocols for testing and to define the different steps that have to be made before we allow the robots to be sold on the market. And then the big issue is, of course, data protection and privacy, especially with care robots being in institutions, in housing. So a new kind of data will be collected, and we call for a balanced approach. Privacy and data protection should be embedded in the principles of necessity and proportionality. Well, these are big principles. I don't know how to transfer them to real life. We in the European Parliament, we have relatively new regulation on privacy, and we have to check whether it fits to robotics. And the big debate in this moment in the European Parliament is about personal data as a currency. And there we didn't come to a common position, because some people believe that they should be considered as currency, personal data, and others are strongly opposed and say, no, this is about a person and you cannot monetarize persons. So the debate is going on, but this will be a debate for the next month. maybe years, as I know my institution. But the questions to whom belongs this data and who has access to this data is, of course, a very important issue. Well, the big part of the report is on liability, because it is urgent to establish who is liable for the actions of a robot, and this is not a philosophical debate on whether a robot has a personality or not. It's about, our concern is about the consumer, that the consumer can be sure that if damage occurs to a third person caused by a robot, that in this case a reparation is made and that someone will pay. So we had long discussions because it's certainly complex to allocate the responsibility between the producers, the designers, network operators, data provider, but in my view it should be the producer. If I buy a driverless car and if this car causes an accident, I think the producer should be liable for the damage. So we call for the Commission to come out with this regulation, and then we go into the details. And we also think about the introduction of a compulsory insurance, at least for different types of robots, as it is the case for now. So, and then we came to a complex discussion in our working group, because we think of the next generation of robots, self-learning robots, increasing autonomy, and it could become more difficult to form a connection between the input, the users from the command, and the output, the robot's behavior. And so in this perspective, we asked the Commission to analyze the pros and cons of attributing an e-personality to a robot. And this is not because someone believes, not at least in the European Parliament. I know that there are some schools who believe that a robot should be rights and obligations, but this was not the view of the Parliament, but the Parliament's view that we should make sure that even with these self-learning robots, the reparation of the damage can be assured. So behind, even if you give a new personality to a robot, behind the robot there are persons. You have to ensure the financing of the damage. And then we came to the ethics, the ethical concern. Our report proposes an ethical charter and a code of conduct for programmers, for research, but also for the users, that they know what they can ask from a robot and how they should behave with the robot. There was a big fear that, well, we in Europe, I would say that generally we are opposed to android robots, that we do not want people to believe that a robot could be a human or a copy of a human, and that we insist very much that a robot is a machine. It's a very sophisticated machine. It can show empathy, but it doesn't feel empathy. So this was a big concern of all the members of the Parliament. And then, of course, we call for that our values should be respected. We make a reference to the Charter of Fundamental Rights, but also to the United Nations Convention on Handicapped People. And then we end with a long list of the ethical principles that should be respected by the programmers, by the designers, not by the robot, but by the designers. Dignity, autonomy, freedom. And there was a new issue, which is now very, I would say, trendy in the European Parliament, about transparency. This came up during the discussions. And I think it originates from the fear that we would not understand what artificial intelligence is doing, or how data can be biased. This is really a big fear, and so we call for, I don't know, frankly, I don't know if our calls are realistic, but we express a concern of our population that there should be open source that there should be accountability of the programmers, that there should be awareness that data can be biased, and explanations in terms that humans can understand, a normal human can understand. So this is what we call for, and this is the question why I'm very much interested to be here, because we need to have this dialogue with scientists to be sure that what we want can be delivered by the community. So, and then there are all the societal aspects which came up in every, I would say, in every discussion we had in our work. But it was clear for us after a relatively short time that all the areas of life would be touched by the development and deployment of robots. And so we have paragraphs on recommendations and how different sectors should react to the interaction of robots. About the care sector, that we should respect the dignity of the people in the care, that we should ask their advice, and that there is a fear that there will be a dehumanization, that robots would replace humans, that there will at the end be no interaction between humans anymore. So this was one of the health sector. What will be the role of the medical doctor? The challenge of our educational system. How can we provide the skills to the people by retraining, but also how can we prepare young people for professions that do not exist yet? So these are the big challenges we underline, and we had a very passionate debate on jobs and employment. The Commission, the European Commission, forecast predicts that by 2020, Europe might have a shortage of more than 800,000 ICT professionals, and that 90% of jobs will require at least basic digital skills.
What is ICT? What is ICT?
That's a good. ICT is coding. Technology.
Computer.
Information.
Okay.
And on the other hand, we had fears arise that robots might destroy more jobs than new jobs will be created, and especially that the middle class would be in danger, because we know that we need very highly skilled people, and I believe that what I understood is that the low skilled people still will always be necessary and requested, but it is the repetitive jobs and tasks that will disappear. So the report asks the Commission to monitor closely the employment market in order to identify more precisely which tasks are taken over by robots. And then we had a discussion on whether we should have a debate or whether we should study the possible introduction of a general basic income if ever the scenario of the worst would happen. But this call was not adopted in the Parliament, so we had no majority for. The report even didn't ask for the introduction of basic income, but we only said, well, this could be an opportunity or possibility on how to assure decent life to people who will not find their place on the employment market. And with, of course, the financial means. So this was the idea that maybe there could be a tax on robots, but this provoked a very agitation. And so we had really a divide between right and left in the European Parliament. The right political parties refused to vote for this, so it is no longer in the report. There is no reference to a general basic income or to taxation of profit. So, the report, concretely now, the report calls on the Commission to come forward with a regulation on liability. We believe that this should be the first issue because we know that the automotive industry is preparing cars is in testing phase with cars, and if they come to the market, we need a regulation, a European regulation, to check whether the data, the privacy legislation has to be adapted to robotics and artificial intelligence. We call the Commission or the European bodies to concentrate on standardization in cooperation with international bodies and to work on ethical principles. So I would like that Europe could propose an ethical code of conduct for producers, which could be discussed internationally, but I think this could be an excellent input from them. And what is positive, I would say, is that for once in the European Union, we could be first, define principles and rules or at the union level, and then the member states could transpose these principles and this rule into national legislation, because you know it's not enough to have a European legislation, it has to be transposed into national legislation. And normally we are running after, we try to harmonize ex post as a different legislation. At this time we could define principles and that would be easier, because I cannot imagine that we have different rules for driverless cars between Germany and France. And then the report calls on the Commission and the member states to launch debates between scientists, policymakers and the general public on how we want to interact with new generations of robots and how we want to organize our societies in order to make sure that innovation brings benefit to all humans, which of course is a challenge. So the report is not just on technical development, but it is really on in what society do we want to live in the next 30, in the future, in the next issue. And that was this made the report so interesting, at least for me, because it was very comprehensive and it touched on all kinds of aspects of human life. So now we are waiting in the European Parliament now. We are waiting for the reaction of the European Commission, and then they come. From what I know, the Commission is preparing a regulation on liability and on different issues. Then these regulations will come back to the European Parliament and to the Councils of Ministers. I don't know if you know how it works between these different institutions, and then we will go into the detail of the regulations. This will be, of course, much more complicated than general principle. So I thank you for your attention, and I am ready to answer questions.
Okay, well, thank you. So we finish a little bit early, so we have a solid. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So maybe I can start, just since you jumped in not knowing that much about robotics.
Nothing.
I really admired the fact that you've come to so many of our conferences and really engaged with the robotics community. Has anything surprised you?
Well, the first thing is that I didn't expect the development to be so fast. I am very, very much impressed when I started 2 years ago. It seemed fast for me, and now there's every week, every day, there is something new happening. Then what surprised me was, what pleased was the enthusiasm of this robotics community. Very, very many engaged and smart people. I like them very much. The small, at least at the beginning, it was a very small community. And then I have to say that I was more frightened and more scared when I started than now. So I imagine that I represent the normal citizen. And we, in Europe at least, we are very much influenced by science fiction. And in science fiction, there is normally robots, android robots are really scary. They destroy people and they kill people. And so when I came to look closer at what is happening in the research and in the industry, I was less scared. And so that's why also I think it's important to have this dialogue with normal people, because they look at movies and they read. Sometimes they read novels and they do not know what really is happening with robots. And when I go to public debates, it's always the same questions. Will robots kill people? And you had this call from very eminent scientists who said that with this artificial intelligence, we will kill, humankind will destroy itself. So this didn't help, frankly. And when I discuss with you, then I think well, these fears are disproportionate. So I don't know. What do you think about it? Is it dangerous?
Well, things are working out, hopefully. That's why we're
So why do you think this conversation is taking place now with robots, where computers, personal computers, have been every home for the last many, many years? So we haven't taxed computers, although they are really taking jobs out. And then we haven't charged insurance for having a computer. And also I guess that we fear computers, but you don't need to have a robot to have the fear for the machine, right? So,
I believe
right.
it's about the physical.
Yeah.
Because it makes something apparent, which is hidden in the computer and the telephone, your phone. But it is
it's more of a visual. It's more of a visual threat.
Because no one is afraid if you buy a toy to your child.
Right.
So nobody is scared. But and nevertheless, I believe there is a lot of data treated by these toy robots, and nobody cares.
Right.
But awareness is developing.
So if we tax robots, do we have to tax also computers, and do we have also to have insurance for computers?
The idea of taxation of robots, which is an old idea, it's not new.
Right.
I remember when I started in politics, we had a discussion on a tax on machines, and so it never happened. But when I discuss or when I meet people from my constituency who are not familiar with robots, the first reaction is, why do you work on robots and why do you promote robotics as you know that they will steal our jobs? And what will you do? So I said the approach of the European Parliament was also to take into consideration these fears. I think this is also the beauty of a policymaker, not only to look at innovation and the industry, but also to collect what normal people are afraid of and what they are thinking, and at least have debate on it. And so there are not a million solutions. And you have this very frightening reports from McKinsey and I don't know, the Big Four say that 80% of jobs will be taken over by robots, which doesn't make the discussion very easy. And so I thought it was important to show to our public that at least we will debate on it, and look what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages. And the idea was not to have a tax on every robot. The idea was to look at what tasks are made by robots, as at least in Europe, our social security system are financed by a tax on labor, and also the general income is mainly, well, most of people earn their life with a paid income. And so as the tax is on these revenues, if there are no longer revenues, well, how shall we finance public service? How shall we finance social security systems? Which is a big concern, at least in the European public opinion. And we have already now in some member states very high unemployment rate. So even if now it is not in the report, I believe the debate will go on. It will go on. Unless we will have a very positive development of the employment market. Otherwise, we will not be rid of this discussion. So my question to you is transparency possible in algorithms?
You mean open source in the sense of access
no, but,
to?
yes, open source. Well, there is of course the trade secret, or how do you call it?
License or?
Licenses, yes.
Yeah, I have a question about transparency. Even in our humans, so we do understand each other, especially in United States President Donald Trump is hardly understandable for me. But so why only robot you wanna be transparent?
We recently held a panel discussion at IIS in Boston a couple weeks ago, which was just about transparency. And there is a big desire, I agree with you, to understand what the algorithms are doing, why a decision was made, to make it explainable so that a person can read it, and to make it unbiased. So everything you said, people are seeing the value, and so they are running workshops across major conferences in machine learning. But at the end of the panel discussion, I asked the researchers who were keen on making their algorithms transparent if they would choose an autonomous car that was not transparent, that had less accidents, or that was transparent but had a few more accidents but could be understood, so you understood why something happened. And both were better than a human driver, and it was very hard for them to choose which one they prefer. So it was interesting because transparency seems to be a goal, but at the end of the day, would you choose the transparent one or the one that gives you accidents?
It's tricky. I don't have the answer. I can only tell you that in this moment, transparency is the, I don't know how to translate it in English, top electorate. It's a topic that comes in all our political discussions about finance, about industry, about beneficial owner of, and so of course also in algorithms. And in robotics, and to this is the fear that artificial intelligence would do things that nobody could rationally understand. So even if we don't understand a human, but we are used to it, because this is new. And everything that is new creates, of course, expectations, but also fears. I think this is inherent to humankind, that you are afraid of new things. And if you imagine that this artificial intelligence is so powerful that they can, there is also some
looming threat?
No. Yes, about it, because we do not understand.
Okay.
We do not understand, so we are fighting.
Can you summarize the proposition that you put forth? Because I read a little bit, and then you were in the media quite a bit in the last month and a half, and then I read different things, but it's the media, which we know now is under debate. Okay. So can we hear from the source some of the things that as roboticists we need to think about, the things that you have been thinking about?
Well, it was quite impressive, the reaction of the media, and along the different member states, the attention was to different statements of the report. But in fact, so I will say first, we want to encourage the development of robotics. It's friendly to the robotic community, it is not against. Secondly, we say that we have to be organized at European level. We also call for the creation of a European agency, so that we have this expertise, and not silo solutions, one for transport, or one for road transport, one for drones, and another one, but that the expertise should be in one place, and this could be the partner also for other international bodies, and also give advice to member states that we have a common approach, because for the European Union it's important to have also the internal market, that we can create a chain of value between the different members. And then we say, well, there's need of urgent action about liability, and let's look at what is asked for the moment, not look into what will happen in 30 years, but be active now on these issues. And then we say, well, as we have to monitor what is happening, look at the development, and then have debates on possible future developments, but not and so in this possible future development, we propose to have a debate on pros and cons of e-personality, of an insurance, because we do not say we need now an insurance for robots, but we say, look, let's look if one day we will need an insurance or a fund for compensating, or monitor the development in job market. So it's more about perspective, but in a two-steps approach. First step, let's do what is necessary now, and not have a very hard regulation, because the development of technology is so fast and we are so slow in lawmaking that we don't want to stifle innovation by making a very hard law. And that's also why we call for code of conduct, ethical committees, because we want this interaction between scientists, philosophers, sociologists, ethical people, so that we launch debate on what will be the future of the interaction humans and robots. But nevertheless, to come back to your question, I believe that everything, everything will change this problem. When you look at lawyers, with any robot or algorithm who can do a research on precise laws, well, you don't need anymore all these trainees who have to pass hours to go through the library and look at. So this will change the training of lawyers, and you need, on the other hand, expert people to contradict the result of an algorithm. And so how shall we train all these people? The same thing, diagnosis in medical cases. The diagnosis of the algorithm is much better than the diagnosis of humans. But nevertheless, this takes the responsibility away from a human doctor.
Right.
So all these questions are very complicated to answer. Because on one hand you have people who think that robots will always do the right thing, that they cannot fail. This is the argument of the automotive industry. It says accidents are caused by humans. If you take out the humans, there will be no more accidents. Well, I don't believe this. Frankly, I cannot imagine that this will be the nice new world. There will be unforeseeable scenarios, and you have to be prepared to this. And that's why I think the debate has to go on. It is not the end of the debate, it's the beginning of how we interact with these very sophisticated robots. At least this is my view. Yes.
Over the course of history, there's always been technology developing and so on. And I would say they have always displaced jobs. Robots or no robots. We just started all this fracking with the natural gas. Supposedly that is what the coal miners have jobs. But when we started doing fracking, nobody was running around saying, oh, this fracking is going to stop everybody's jobs, take away jobs from so-and-so. There was that issue there discussed. It just happened. All these coal miners have lost their jobs, and nobody said anything. And we keep fracking, and there's no stopping it. So I'm wondering why there's no
would say I agree, but first there was even in, I come from even at the during the Roman Empire, the Roman emperors were concerned when there was a new way to transport heavy goods, and he said, no, we cannot use them because this will make people unemployed. And the same thing happened in the British Empire with Queen, I don't know, Victoria, or I don't know, who refused to patent a machine, a knitting machine, because she said this will make my poor people even poorer because the job will be low. So this was a concern every time when a new innovation took place. And I agree with you that there will be changes and that we have to adapt. But what some experts point is that now the development is much faster. And the question is whether humans can adapt so quickly, so fast to this development. And what I would like to add, it was easier when there were less people in the world.
It was easier when there was less people in the world?
Less people in the world, because we face nevertheless problems with I come from a small country. Luxembourg is only not even 600,000 people. So we are lucky, I would say. And we have no problem of creation of jobs. But when I look at these big megalopolis, these big cities, and I wonder how can you how can you provide services and good education to everyone? This is a big challenge. We even are not able to give good education to everyone in the world now. And now we say, well, we have to educate people and to provide better education and to give them skills. And this needs a lot of invest in human resources, in money, and I'm not sure if governments are able to provide them. This is my main. I was Minister of Education in my country for nearly 10 years, and I can tell you that to reform the educational system is very, very difficult. And now we tell people, well, we will upgrade your skills and we will do it very quickly, and you have to take into account the mentality. Education is very slow, it takes years and years to educate someone, and we even cannot tell them to what we will educate. What will be the skill? Not everyone will be a programmer. And I'm not sure if everyone wants to be active in ICT. And we have, because one of our concerns is also the gender, as we are the 8th of March, is the gender gap. Because, today there are many women in the audience, but normally we know that I think 90% of programmers are men. And this, how can we convince women and young girls to be engaged in ICT? And because the trend, at least in the European Union, that less and less girls are studying science, or in general, there are less students in how do you call it that? No, STEM. And we need them. And everyone tells us that we need them, and we do not manage to convince young people to study it. So that's why I am a bit concerned.
4 more minutes.
One final question or two? All right, we'll
Mark.
take one over there and then the next one.
Let's take these two.
In the parliament, are there some people,
Can you
a lot of
louder?
people that have the position that progress should be slowed down because of this?
Yeah. Yes,
How
clearly,
is this?
but it is a minority, and
Is it
it's
the left or right?
it's clearly right. There is I discovered a new class. I don't know how to call it. So you have a very organization, NGO called Family for Europe, and they are very conservative, and so they lobbied many members of parliament to vote against the report because it says that we are denying humanity to humans. So it's relatively, this they are playing on this android aspect of robots, that robots will be better persons. So it's quite, but this exists, and so they want us to stop research and not to finance anything robotic. But I think it's an illusion to have a ban on research.
But on the same line, so is there, in what main points is there a big difference between left and right? For example, in liability, is there a big difference?
No, in liability we have no. The big difference between left and right was that the right parties objected that we took too much into concern the loss of jobs. That this makes this anti-innovation, anti-industry, and our reply at the left side was to say, well, we want to encourage industry, but we have to take into consideration the fears of people. So this was the main opposition. It was really. I don't know if you have the time to read the report, because it's like political reports are normally very annoying to read. But I never had the impression that we were against innovation or against robots, but taking on board the positive, but also the fears of people.
I suppose the EU is effectively creating those regulations that will protect jobs and maybe protect some of the robots. The rest of the world, or many parts of the rest of the world, will probably not make the same decisions, and maybe the jobs that you try to protect will still disappear because they're.
That's the argument why it was not adopted. It is not adopted.
Okay.
It was not adopted, and with the argument that we will stifle innovation if we have a tax on robots.
But it's kind of this dilemma.
Yeah, it's a dilemma.
I want to say something short.
On the other hand, I believe that in the European Union we have the best protection of humans of all of the whole world. I want to keep it. My political fight is to provide safety and security to people. I like industry and I like research, but I think the job of a policymaker is to be concerned about the well-being of human beings and not of industry. You have to encourage industry, because otherwise, if there's no creation of wealth, you cannot make a distribution. But the creation of wealth is not an aim in itself. That's at least my political view.
But the intent, the effect is different.
Yes, I know. But this is always the argument why we should not do anything social, because if we harm our industry and then we lose a competitive advantage. It's always the same. It's like the chicken, no, not the chicken. What is the right word?
I don't know English either.
So one quick comment. We're going to start the next meeting, but I think there's there's some synergies here in this room. We have people there from NASA, and I'm not sure what role NASA plays on policymaking in the US, but I'm sure because robotics is very strong at NASA, they probably have something that they. NASA, the aerospace agency, right? ESA, NASA, and then we also have people representing here Japanese government. So I think there's an opportunity for. I mean, at least I would like to at a certain point sit down with all of you and see what are the different flavors of the things you're talking in different countries,
yes,
right?
That's why I'm interested to be here.
Yeah.
To listen to what you have, what are the views of others. I try to report as good as I can.
Right.
The concerns and the thinking of the discussions going on in Europe.
Right.
And so I think also what we miss in Europe is that we have not a big research from the military, from defense. So this is missing. So we have a very, the European Commission always tells us that we have the biggest partnership on civil research for robotics, but this does not replace all the developments that are made by military research.
Right.
And our report didn't tackle the defense or military robots because I think this is too complicated.
Okay, well.
Thank you, Mady, again for coming so far to explain.
Thank you.